This video contains spoilers for episode 45 of the Thousand Year Blood War Arc anime, plus the remainder of the Thousand Year Blood War Arc manga that's still to come. Well, that was certainly something. Have we all had time to digest what happened yet, or not? Episode 45 of the Thousand Year Blood War Arc, titled Defend You, is in fact the single biggest, most dramatic departure from the manga to date, featuring not just a totally new transformation for Ichigo, resulting, by the way, in a completely new fight, for all intents and purposes anyway, but the episode ends with maybe the craziest thing I've ever seen from Bleach, certainly from this Thousand Year Blood War Arc anime adaptation. Something I never expected, did not anticipate in any shape or form. In one final act of defiance, mustering all her strength, collecting a power that, as Aizen once said, trespasses upon the realm of God himself, Orihime protects Ichigo, Rukia, and the world by forcibly rejecting Yhwach himself entirely, a selfless act that sees her sacrificing herself to seemingly destroy the Quincy King once and for all. So yeah, as of the end of that episode, Orihime Inoue is no more. But is everything really as it seems? Even those of us who have read the manga have been left scratching our heads in regards to what might happen next. And so in today's video, I want to try and break down that shocking, pivotal cliffhanger and determine what might be coming next. With only 5 episodes to go until the end of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, this is a critical juncture. And I can't help but think that despite the severity of these changes, the magnitude of these changes, both to Ichigo, to Orihime, to Yhwach, and the final fight itself, that the reality of the manga version of things to come might be waiting just around the corner. So let's dive in. First off, however, I just have to say, an enormous thank you to everyone for the unbelievable response to the previous live reaction. It is on pace to be my biggest performing Thousand Year Blood War Arc live reaction ever, even topping that incredible run at the end of Core 2, when we had the brand new battle between the Zero Division and the Schutzstaffel. This is looking to be even bigger, and it just goes to show how unprecedented this level of excitement is among the Bleach community, and it is a truly wonderful thing to see. And it's obviously a massive privilege that you guys choose to come back here every single week in such an incredible and unbelievable way. So again, thank you all so very much. And if you want to help continue supporting the channel, one of the best ways to do so is over on Patreon, the link to which you can find in the description below, where so many of you have now gone. You are really helping the channel out. You're really helping to support Bleach content like this. So it does mean absolutely everything, and thank you all so very much. I can't express it enough. So what actually went down at the end of the last episode? After activating his bankai, Ichigo transformed into his new Blood Chains form. More on that in the next video, though we will go over it a bit here as well. And he, along with Rukia, who was also using bankai, which was great to see, took the fight to Yhwach directly, attempting to overpower the Soul King. Unfortunately, however, despite Ichigo's incredible new strength, he and Rukia proved to be no match for their enemy. Yhwach impaled Rukia through the chest, pinning her to the ground in what is one of the craziest visuals I think Bleach has ever produced, while pressing his boot down on Ichigo's head, a second reishi blade running our hero through as he lay destitute in defeat. And I can't help but think the boot to the head is maybe meant to be a callback to Yamamoto's death. As Yhwach belittles Ichigo's power to protect, Orihime gets to her feet. The sound of dripping blood echoes throughout the chamber, and she begins walking slowly towards Yhwach. As she does, her hairpins break off one by one, transforming into the individual Rika, as Orihime calls their names, which again was a very nice little moment. It's easy to forget that the Rika are their own characters. We haven't seen them, I don't think, since Tsubaki was destroyed and then brought back to life by Hachi. So yeah, this was nice to see, especially since Orihime knew they were going to their deaths, and presumably they did as well. But as the Rika encircle Orihime, they seem to draw blood up from the ground and then trail it behind themselves as though laying the foundations for some kind of twisted blood spell. With the blood trails now surrounding Orihime on all sides, Yhwach tries to blast her with his power, but the Rika line up in single file in front of her, deflecting the oncoming attack with ease. Deciding not to take any chances, Yhwach instead unleashes 6 torrents of his energy at once, but Orihime once again blocks them all. As Orihime stands in a pool of her own blood, the Rika continue to manipulate it, drawing it in strands around the girl, weaving some kind of orb. Eventually, all of the blood has been taken up from the ground, and now the Rika are using it to conjure a bright crimson shield in front of Orihime. I'll be totally honest, I'm not entirely sure how she's doing all of this per se, where this is all coming from aside from her own innate, instinctual resolve to protect and defend those that she loves, which I guess is enough. But Orihime then effectively floats into the Crimson Shield and kind of passes through it, almost as though it's a doorway, as if emerging from a membrane, and seemingly takes that power of rejection, the power of the Rika, unto herself. And interestingly, the Rika themselves, who were manifesting the red energy pool by circling it at all times, appear to have vanished. And based off what happens next, it is as though Orihime has perhaps become one with the 6 Rika herself. It's almost as though she used to channel their power of rejection, but now she has become said power. As she soars towards Yhwach, we can see streams of red light flowing from her forehead, which then transform before our eyes, taking the shape of a shimmering gold halo. As the halo spirals to an epicenter, it transforms again, reshaping itself as a prominent golden 6-petaled flower, the ultimate form of her Rika that we've ever seen to date. As Yhwach attempts to bring his sword down upon Orihime as she closes in on him, Orihime counters by unleashing the power of her Rika, forcing Yhwach back and holding him effectively in some form of stasis. As the golden petals close up around Yhwach, seemingly sealing his fate, Orihime turns and says a tearful goodbye to Ichigo, the blood vanishing from her face and body as she rejects everything within the shimmering space. With the golden petals reflected in Ichigo's eyes, Orihime's power unleashes a catastrophic explosion that consumes both her and Yhwach entirely, the two of them disappearing into the ether, as a flurry of petals litter the throne room in their wake. As Ichigo can only look on, horrified, aghast at Orihime's surprise sacrifice. It does appear, though, that the battle and the war is finally won. Or at least it would be, except something else is happening at the same time. Under normal circumstances, this would indeed spell the end of Yhwach. Even his Soul King-infused power is incapable of overcoming the pinnacle of Orihime's ability of rejection, one that has always been said to trespass upon God's domain. Without the Almighty, there really is nothing more he can do. But these aren't normal circumstances. For at the same time, over in a different part of Varvelt, Uryu at last gets the upper hand on Hashwolf. In a really fantastic sequence, Uryu outsmarts his enemy, discovering that Hashwolf's version of the Almighty has to reset for 3 seconds after he uses it to peer into the future. Exploiting that gap in Hashwolf's precognition, Uryu suddenly grabs the Sternritter Grand Master and, using the antithesis, he places a Leidenhand upon Hashwolf's hand. Breaking the seal on the glove, Uryu activates it, and in a flash of blue light, robs Hashwolf of the Almighty entirely. Completely helpless to do anything, Hashwolf screams as his eyes return to normal and he loses his ability to see the future entirely. Now there's a lot I want to talk about regarding all of this, and I adore this sequence. I think it works perfectly. Uryu outsmarts Hashwolf, not with some random power-up, but with a wonderful callback to his grandfather, his arc across the story, and the Quincy in general. But at the same time, Uryu inadvertently dooms everyone and completely scuppers Orihime's sacrificial plan. The moment Hashwolf loses the Almighty, its power returns to Yhwach, meaning from that point onwards, where the anime explicitly shows us a shot of Yhwach with 3 pupils once more, the Quincy King has once again acquired the power to not only see the future, but to rewrite it. Of course, it's not Uryu's fault, it's just phenomenally bad timing. But I do love the fact that the anime has managed to intrinsically tie the outcomes of these 2 fights together. That's really, really good stuff. And I wonder what would have happened if Yhwach had been erased prior to Hashwolf losing the Almighty. Would he have just lost the Almighty anyway, since it's technically Yhwach's power? Does it die with the Quincy King? I'm not entirely sure, but before we move on, let's talk a little more about the Almighty, as it does play a crucial role here in the outcome of episode 45. Before we do that, however, I'm trying to reach 300,000 subs here on the channel. I can only do it with your help as well. A massive thank you to all the new subscribers who have joined us recently. It really does make a massive difference on that journey. But for those of you who haven't yet hit the button yet, please consider doing so today. It's a massive help, and I really do appreciate it. So, the Almighty. Now, again, this is something I will be going into more depth in my review, but this surprise twist ending is only possible thanks to the significant way the anime has changed how the Almighty works. And it's been a little confusing, to be honest, for those of us who read the manga over the last few weeks or so, because this change has only really come about at the start of Core 4. In the manga, Hashwolf can only access the power of the Almighty while Yhwach is asleep. That is made very explicit. Uryu sends Ichigo and the others to confront Yhwach in chapter 661, specifically because he knows Yhwach is currently asleep, therefore he's currently vulnerable because he doesn't have his future sight power. And yet the manga was always kind of weird about this as well, because by the time they get to Yhwach, it's all meaningless anyway, because it's morning, and the Quincy King is awake and he's got his power back. Ichigo and Orihime don't get any time with him without it, which is why Kubo had to introduce the contrived version of this, where Yhwach basically just sits back and says, alright, well, I won't use my power. It's nonsense, but it's kind of what had to be done. The anime has totally changed all of that. Kind of. Hashwolf still gains the power of the Almighty while Yhwach sleeps, and when that happens, Hashwolf himself now has red eyes, the same red eyes as Yhwach, as though he's literally taken the king's eyes, while Yhwach is asleep. The key difference, though, is that when Yhwach wakes up again, he doesn't automatically take the Almighty back. Hashwolf continues to use his own version of the Almighty, but now with blue eyes instead. And that's where the confusion comes from, I think, because even though Hashwolf is now using his own version of the power, and even though Yhwach is now awake, Yhwach apparently does not have the Almighty whatsoever until he presumably forcibly takes it back, or Hashwolf gives it up, maybe by going to sleep himself. This confusion is only exacerbated. At the start of episode 41, we see Yhwach waking up from his dream, and as he does so, the eyes open up on his head and he can seemingly see everything that is going to happen. Now, back in that episode review, I mentioned that the only way this makes any sense is if what we're seeing here is Yhwach waking up prior to basically all of Core 3 happening. And that does still make sense based on the events of this episode, because it crucially means that Hashwolf has not got the power of the Almighty yet by the time of Yhwach waking up, though that in itself is weird because Yhwach simply being asleep would mean that Hashwolf had the power for a while. Anyway, what only serves to reinforce this confusion, however, is that in the manga, Yhwach's body was only covered in those huge Soul King eyes when he had the Almighty active. That was specifically done to show that he was currently using this power. Now, this episode is almost entirely new, almost completely new, but it does contain a couple of shots from the manga, including this one, where eyes open up all over Yhwach's form. In the anime, this shot is just Yhwach taking the fight more seriously and unleashing a bunch of lasers from every eye. But in the manga, this shot is specifically meant to be Yhwach activating the Almighty, after originally saying he wouldn't use it. But the power of Ichigo's Horn of Salvation form forces him to do so. So you can see why this feels a little all over the place, and it feels like this change was a pretty recent one. The crux of the matter is that in the anime canon, simply waking up doesn't seem to grant Yhwach the Almighty again. However, when Uryu forces Hashwolf to lose his power, that ability returns to Yhwach, giving him the power to see and rewrite the future once more. Speaking of which, and again I'll get into this in my review, but Yhwach's body being capable of being shredded to pieces is a little bit weird in my opinion. It kind of throws the idea of him being vulnerable while he doesn't have the Almighty out the window. Blood Chains Ichigo's Getsuga literally does nothing to him because he can just reform. And it's not really explained why this is possible. Again, it kind of felt like the only reason Yhwach's body was like this in the manga was because of the Almighty. Again, Yhwach has absorbed the Soul King's power, yes, but much of this is just meant to be a surplus power that's constantly dripping down him. Here in the anime, however, his entire physical form has completely changed without rhyme or reason. How were they ever supposed to win, Almighty or otherwise, when Yhwach literally can't be killed even without it? Well, aside from Orihime's divine powers, of course. It kind of feels like this was added in to explain, or at least try and explain, some of the weirdness that does go on without explanation in the manga. For example, Ichigo's Sero carving into Yhwach's body, that's just never explained in the manga how that doesn't seem to hurt him or do anything. And then later in the very final battle, when Ichigo uses Getsuga to carve Yhwach in two, and he kind of just turns into a weird goop. Again, that's never explained really in the manga at all outside of he has the Soul King's power. So it kind of feels like they're trying to lean into that here in the anime, which again, I guess makes some kind of sense, but it could do with some actual concrete reasoning behind it. So the big question on everyone's mind, of course, is what's going to happen next? Now, while we're all currently reeling from the insanity of this week's episode, looking beyond that, the truth is that I think much of what's just happened is going to be undone fairly quickly. Now, of course, this is all total speculation on my part, but I don't think the anime is just going to abandon the manga completely. We already know from the final trailer, so long as it's not a fake out, that this isn't the end of Uryu versus Hashwolf. As much as I think that would be a really, frankly, awesome way to close out that fight, no. We're going to return to the manga version of the battle, where Uryu draws a brand new bow and likely reveals his shrift in full, while Hashwolf does the same. That will probably be a big focus of episode 6. I'm still pretty confident as well that that fight will end in exactly the same way it does in the manga, and again, that could happen this coming episode. All Uryu has achieved here in episode 45 is finally relieving Hashwolf of the Almighty, but Hashwolf, at least for now, depending on how the Leiden Hand actually works in a situation like this, still has his own power and his own shrift to fall back on, and that's what he'll probably do. But the bigger question obviously revolves around Orihime. Now, there's simply no way Orihime is going to stay dead, unless the anime is taking an enormous swerve that's going to rewrite potentially the future of Bleach, but I doubt it. Plus, I'm fairly sure a voice actor for Kazui was already cast. So Orihime is coming back, and I imagine she'll be back fairly soon. Now, Kubo himself teased a while back that episode 6 would be called The End. which is the title of chapter 679. And the truth is that Orihime's sacrifice lines up rather nicely with the events of that chapter. In the cliffhanger of chapter 678, and then throughout chapter 679, Yhwach reveals the true nature of the Almighty. It is not just the power to see the future, but it is the power to alter it as well, the single most broken ability in Bleach. It can be easy to forget, since we already know what it does, but in the anime, this has not been revealed. Yhwach's power is, as far as we and the characters know, still just the power to see the future. Now, its ability to alter it has been teased, in my opinion, a couple of times, but this is the moment of the actual reveal. In the manga, the truth of this power is revealed in a pretty dramatic and controversial way. Yhwach breaks Ichigo's new bankai in the future the moment he reveals it. Now in the anime, it looks like the truth will be revealed instead by having Yhwach bring himself back to life, even after Orihime seemingly destroyed him. Of course, to do so, that means he will have to bring Orihime back as well, since there's no way for him to unreject himself without doing so. That doesn't mean he won't still break Ichigo's bankai, but even that has taken an interesting turn now. And again, I'll be making a full video on Ichigo's new form and bankai in the coming days, but to just touch on it for a moment. For a while, the prevailing theory among the fanbase was that the anime would demonstrate the scope and power of Tensa Zangetsu by having Ichigo use it to overwhelm Yhwach, only to then reveal it was all a vision of the future. And I've seen a lot of discourse, people seem to think that could still be the case, but no, I don't think so. Everything that happened in this episode prior to Yhwach regaining the Almighty right at the end still happened. It's all real. Yhwach can't change the past. Because again, they were fighting a Yhwach who couldn't see into the future at that point, and was just relying on the power of the Soul King. But again, even this is kind of weird now. Yhwach breaks Ichigo's bankai in the future in the manga because he fears its true power after having seen what it can do. But here in the anime, there's no other way to put it. Yhwach pretty effortlessly defeats Ichigo even with his new bankai. Really, the person he needs to be killing in the future is Orihime, and maybe he will try to do that once he brings them both back. I still think he might snap Ichigo's bankai in two just to show off his ability, but certainly I don't really see a reason for him to fear it, based on what's currently happened so far. And also, another thing to consider is that if Yhwach reveals the true nature of his power by bringing himself back to life, then the shock factor of Ichigo's bankai breaking in two is kind of gone. Again, maybe that will still happen. Maybe Ichigo's bankai will suddenly be broken in two before Yhwach reappears physically. But again, it still feels like the impact won't be quite the same. Just to tease out some of my thoughts about this new Blood Chains Ichigo, this seems to confirm what I mentioned a while back in a video I made on Horn of Salvation Ichigo, that now, once he finally has mastered this power, he can call out specific transformations based on his individual hybrid nature. And Horn of Salvation is specifically his hollow power manifested. And even in that form, he has a new, hollow-specific version of his true bankai. So I imagine, if Ichigo remained just his Shinigami self, then his true bankai would be the normal one from the manga, his unadulterated Shinigami bankai. And on the other side of the spectrum, it seems totally possible that in the future, he might even be capable of calling out a Quincy form of himself too, maybe complete with a Quincy version of his bankai, though maybe not, because his Quincy powers are completely separate from his Hollow and Shinigami ones, which are fused together. I still think he could call out a Quincy-centric version of himself, it just won't be able to use bankai, or it won't have a different bankai anyway. He could probably use the Quincy version of himself alongside his normal bankai, but I don't think his bankai is going to change in the same way it did here in the episode. It is a little strange in the sense that we see the hollow version of his true bankai before the normal one, But then it was always a bit weird that the first time we saw Ichigo's true Bankai at all in the manga, he was partially transformed anyway. But if this does turn out to be the case, and Ichigo's Bankai can be manipulated depending on what power he's currently called up to the surface, then I think that's a definite improvement on the underwhelming design of his true Bankai from the manga. It's a lot more versatile, it's a lot more interesting. I do wonder how the anime is going to organically revert Ichigo's Bankai's blade to something different, unless it literally just changes shape when he disengages the Horn of Salvation, but I guess we'll see probably fairly soon. So, to summarise, before I go off on a huge tangent, I think next episode we will see Ichigo mourning Orihime, but at the very least it appears the war is won. Despite this, Hashwolf will menacingly tell Uryu that he's made a huge mistake. And we'll get this moment from back in chapter 675, where Hashwolf gloats that the true terror of the Almighty is not the power to see the future, as we return to the manga version of their fight. Then, over in the throne room, as Ichigo tries to help Rukia, a sinister darkness spreads as Yhwach returns from beyond the veil, Orihime coming back with him. But it's here that Yhwach reveals to a stunned set of heroes that the Almighty is not the power to see the future, but it is the power to alter it. Perhaps as Ichigo then tries to rush the Quincy King in desperation, he suddenly looks down and realizes his Bankai's blade has been broken in two before being defeated by Yhwach. The only part I'm kind of struggling with now is where to fit Ichigo's normal true Bankai in. Because Ichigo's hollow true Bankai has been pretty soundly defeated by a Yhwach who didn't even have the Almighty, by the way. A part of me wonders if Tsukishima is going to have an even bigger part to play here, and may somehow come in clutch in a way that's even more consequential than he did in the manga. But I'm not sure. Again, this is complete speculation on my part, but that is so fun. This is so exciting, not really knowing what's coming at all. But I will say, I'm confident Orihime is coming back, almost certainly this week, and probably fairly quickly into the episode, and I'm also confident that what we just saw in episode 45 wasn't a vision of the future, it actually happened. And sadly, it wasn't enough. But alright everyone, that's it for my video on that Orihime scene from the last episode. What an absolutely crazy moment it is. And also my thoughts on how things might play out next time, based on the manga, as I think the two will interlink pretty nicely here. And I think next week's episode could be a very interesting one for those of us who are looking for even more divergences from the manga, because it's totally possible that next week Yhwach enacts the Owls of Aelin that wipes out both Gerard and Hashwolf. So I'm very curious to see what happens. We really don't have very long left. And it kind of feels like despite the limited chapter count remaining, there is actually a fair bit still to cover in these next 5 episodes or so. So I can't wait to find out. I truly cannot wait. I'm really more excited for Bleach than I've pretty much ever been since the manga ended. So yeah, I cannot wait to see what happens in episode 46. Alright guys, once again, thank you so very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on my thoughts, my theories regarding the next episode, what happened to Orihime, what happened to Hashwolf, to Yhwach, to Ichigo, all of these characters. Let me know your thoughts. I'd absolutely love to read them. Consider hitting subscribe if you haven't done already to help support the channel and its growth, and also check out Patreon as well, which is a fantastic way to really help support the channel, and also enjoy the uncensored versions of the live reactions to the episodes as well. There's still 5 more to go, and we'd love to have you over on Patreon, so again, your support is greatly, greatly appreciated. But again, guys, thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.